So, you think you know the Bible, right? But what if I told you that its very first story is also its most forgotten one? Today, we're going to look at a foundational idea that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time. Okay, let's just dive right in with a huge question. The story of creation. It's right there, page 1. But what if we've been missing its true weight for centuries? What if it's not just the opening act, but the entire stage for everything that comes after? You know, some really sharp academic work has pointed out this bizarre trend. For a huge chunk of modern history, the whole idea of creation has been kind of pushed to the side, consistently underestimated in both the church and in scholarly circles. So, what do we even mean by marginalization of creation? Well, it's basically this habit of treating creation like, I don't know, the opening credits to a movie. It's the warm-up act for what's seen as the main event, the Exodus, salvation, instead of seeing it as the fundamental reality of everything. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to unpack how creation got pushed aside. Then we'll play detective and investigate the culprits behind it all. After that, we'll look at its big comeback story. And finally, we'll see why this rediscovery really changes everything. All right, so how did this all start? I mean, this isn't some brand new discovery. It's a conversation that has been slowly building for almost 100 years.
Yeah, you heard that right. Way back in the 1930s, people were already flagging this. A theologian named Gerhard von Rad, for instance, he pointed out that the story of God as a redeemer in history had just totally eclipsed the story of God as the creator of the entire world.
But the big question is, why? How on earth did the very first, most universal theme in the Bible get shoved to the side? Well, scholars have basically put together a lineup of the usual suspects. Let's call them the 11 culprits. It really wasn't just one thing, it was like a perfect storm of ideas. You can kind of group these culprits together. First, you had these huge intellectual shifts. Existential philosophy, for example, was so focused on the human drama that nature just became a passive backdrop. At the same time, as modern science took off, some theologians just sort of handed over the study of the natural world to scientists. Then you have the internal theological stuff, a massive focus on God's actions in human history, on salvation, on the spiritual realm, and all that often came at the expense of the earthly physical world. And finally, there was this kind of anxiety, a fear of sounding too much like neighboring nature religions, so creation got downplayed. It all just added. But of course, that is not where the story ends. After decades of sitting on the back burner, something powerful started to shift. Scholars and theologians began to push back, saying, hey, wait a minute, we missed something huge here. A creation comeback was officially underway. So what was the number one thing that kicked this whole comeback off? Believe it or not, our growing global environmental crisis. When you're faced with very real ecological problems, you're forced to go back to your foundational texts and ask, okay, what does this tradition actually have to say about the natural world? And it wasn't just the environmental movement. A whole bunch of other intellectual currents came together. People started getting more interested in the Bible's original historical context, taking a fresh look at texts that are deeply connected to creation, and hey, the conversation between science and faith started getting a lot more productive. Sometimes the most profound insights are the ones staring you right in the face. The scholar Rolf Rentorf just put it so simply. The Hebrew Bible begins with creation. He was basically asking how generations of theologies could just ignore the book's very first chapter. It's such a simple point, but it's totally revolutionary when you realize how often it was just glossed over. So, where does all this lead? Well, it builds toward a completely different way of understanding the text's entire worldview. This isn't just about rearranging some furniture, this is like rebuilding the whole house on a totally new foundation. This slide really nails the shift. The old view basically saw creation as an afterthought. The logic was God is a redeemer, so therefore he must also be the creator. See, it's an inference. But the new view flips that on its head. Creation isn't the backstory, it's the fundamental, all-embracing framework. It is the stage where history, redemption, all of it gets to happen. And what this really means is that putting creation first makes it the most universal theme possible. Right? History and redemption can be seen as specific to certain people or certain times, but creation? That includes everyone and everything, always. History depends on creation, not the other way around. And that all leads us to one last big question to chew on. If we stop seeing creation as just the start of the story and start seeing it as the entire context for our existence, well, how does that change the way we see the world, our place in it, and maybe even our responsibilities to it? Now that's something to think about.